When last week began, I was expecting to release a Halo Infinite video much sooner, but another topic, one I've been meaning to discuss for a while now, was brought back to the forefront of my mind: the relationship between humans and Forerunners. An essential part of the Halo franchise from the very start, the relation between these two species has changed and evolved, pun intended, quite a bit since those early days, as has the discussion around them. Today I'd like to set the record straight, or as straight as one YouTube video can, looking at how things began and where they have ultimately rested today. This is the evolution of the Forerunner-Human relationship. It's no secret at this point that the early development of Halo was hectic, and things were prone to change based on the demands of development. For example, an early idea of the Flood involved them being a Covenant-made parasite. As the final form of Halo was coming together, though, the relation between the ancient enigmatic Forerunners and humanity, the so-called Reclaimers, had essentially been nailed down. Humans were the modern descendants of Forerunners, the beings the Covenant worshipped. The specifics of that relationship might have changed along the way and would certainly continue to evolve, but this was the underlying fact that would form the early lore of Halo. For the community, the relationship between these two species would become a hot topic of debate, with fans providing shreds of evidence and speculation to find their answers. When Halo 2 came out, debate was once again reignited, with many fans particularly drawn to this hand shape on a Forerunner holopad. It could be definitive proof that Forerunners had 6 fingers, and I suspect this influenced that eventual decision, or it could be due to any other number of reasons. It was really the Wild West of lore back in those days. Halo 3, however, was where things started to take a turn. During the game's campaign, several moments seemed to indicate, in no uncertain terms, that humans are the direct descendants of the Forerunners.
The father's sins pass to his son.
I see now why they left you behind.
You are Forerunner!
And if it had just been quotes like these, Halo may have looked like a very different franchise today. However, Halo 3 came with terminals. A feature brought over from Halo's spiritual predecessor, Marathon, the Halo 3 terminals revealed numerous details about the Forerunner Flood War and new hints at the Human-Forerunner relationship. The Halo 3 terminals tell several stories, but we'll be focusing largely on the conversation between the Didact and the Librarian featured in these terminals. In them, the Didact pleads with the Librarian to return to safe Forerunner space, or as safe as Forerunner space can be at that point, rather than running around the galaxy collecting samples of species for the repopulation efforts that would follow Halo's firing. During her work, the Librarian stumbles upon a planet with a special species, which she indexes and transports to the Ark. Then, she decides to stay on this unnamed world, awaiting the fires of Halo. Though the species and planet go unnamed in the original terminals, the implication is that the Librarian found Earth and indexed humanity. The mention of a portal near a mountain is a fairly clear reference to the portal at Voi, which is built in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. So, despite what the cinematics may be telling players, Halo 3's terminals make a pretty strong implication that humans and Forerunners are separate species. This is essentially where 343 Industries would pick up from when they took over the franchise. The Halo 3 terminals were written by Frank O'Connor, Damien Isla, and 2 individuals from the Bungie studio named Rob. I suspect one may have been Robert McLeese, one of the old Bungie lore keepers, so to speak. According to Frankie, the terminals were based on conversations with Joe Staten and other Bungie alumni, along with notes and ideas from prior Halo games, and even a few from the Marathon era. Though these terminals would seemingly conflict with later revelations from the Forerunner saga of books, these are generally chalked up to mendicant bias being a slightly unreliable narrator. An old podcast 343 used to host, the Sparkcast, confirmed that Mendicant had manipulated the terminals to serve its own purposes. In addition, Halo 3's viral marketing campaign, an ARG known as Iris, also supported the idea that humans and Forerunners were separate species. Written by Frank O'Connor as well, Iris was essentially a prologue to what Halo 3's terminals would present. All this said, the debate was far from settled. While the games appeared to promote a unified humans are Forerunners idea, things were never so clear-cut. Throughout Halo 3, humanity is often referred to as the children, so to speak, of the Forerunners.
You are the child of my makers, inheritor of all they left behind. You are Forerunner.
With that additional context, Spark's statement can be interpreted as less literal and more figurative. This is just as true for quotes from the Gravemind,
Child of my enemy, why have you come? I offer no forgiveness. The father's sins pass to his son.
And even the prophet of truth himself.
Your forefathers wisely set aside their compassion, steeled themselves for what needed to be done. I see now why they left you behind.
And so the debate would continue to rage, even as the Halo franchise was, seemingly, coming to a close. Halo is more than just its games, however, featuring a huge and diverse collection of stories outside the mainline and spin-off titles. At this point, Bungie's animosity towards the EU is no secret. They tried to shut down the Fall of Reach novel and only agreed to the novelization of Halo CE, Halo the Flood, provided any new characters that are introduced are killed off by the end, though admittedly not a hard feat to pull off. When it comes to the relationship between Forerunners and humans, the EU couldn't really commit to anything. There are moments throughout the early novels that hint at the connection, but never go into any detail. Probably the best known example, though, would come from Halo the Flood, in the scene in which the Master Chief activates a light bridge for the first time. The display's shimmering geometric patterns nagged at him, as if he should recognize them somehow. Even with his enhanced memory, he couldn't place where he'd seen them before. They just seemed familiar. He reached a finger out to one of the symbols, a blue-green circle. The Spartan expected his finger to pass through nothing more than air. He was surprised when his finger met resistance, and the panel lights began to pulse more quickly. "What did you do?" Cortana asked, her voice alarmed. "I'm detecting an energy spike." "I don't know," the Spartan admitted. He wasn't sure why he touched the button on the display. He just knew it felt right. Some of you may notice how similar this description is to the later concept of Gesha or Gai. If you're unfamiliar with those terms, don't worry, we'll be getting into those in just a bit. This passage from Halo the Flood is about as close to a commitment as the books would come to in the Bungie era. It was an exciting mystery waiting to be solved. As noted with the release of Halo 3, the relation between humans and Forerunners became a bit more muddied. Then, not long after Halo 3's launch, the novel Halo Contact Harvest, the first Halo novel to be written by Joe Staten, released and only added to the confusion. Seeming to reaffirm humans being the descendants of Forerunners, the novel features a scene where a fragment of the once rogue AI Mendicant Bias, which had been dormant in the key ship that had sat at the heart of High Charity, awakens and reveals to three Sanshayun prophets that, quote,
"For eons I have watched. Listen to you misinterpret. This is not reclamation, this is reclaimer, and those it represents are my makers. My makers are my masters. I will bring them safely to the Ark."
Still, this didn't deter fans from debating. People would point out that Mendicant isn't exactly the most reliable narrator, a point we've already touched on, and that it is in fact one of the prophets, the future prophet of truth, who comes to the conclusion that humans are Forerunners who were, quote, left behind. This of course sparks the three prophets to take over the Covenant, becoming the High Prophets of Truth, Mercy, and Regret, and declaring a holy war against humanity. Interestingly, the more recent novel, Halo Divine Wind, addressed this lingering inconsistency, declaring that Truth, Mercy, and Regret had instead learned that humans were the chosen inheritors of the Forerunner legacy, rather than the previously assumed Sanshayum, or prophets. But we're jumping ahead a bit, aren't we? Bungie was bought by Microsoft in 2000, and by 2007, they desired independence once more. Long story short, Bungie and Microsoft officially split in June 2007, with Bungie promising 3 more Halo games as part of the separation deal. As that happened, Microsoft began putting together a dedicated studio to oversee the Halo franchise in all its forms, from games to comics to books and beyond. And one of their early projects would be the Forerunner saga. A trilogy written by sci-fi legend Greg Bear, the Forerunner saga would confirm that humans and Forerunners were both around and interacting with each other 100,000 years ago. While this would appear to solve the mystery once and for all, the book still hinted at a deeper connection between the two species through the even more mysterious beings known as precursors. First mentioned in Halo 3's Bestiarum, the precursors were revealed to be the ones who seeded life in the Milky Way and even guided its development in some cases. In addition, to address how humans are able to interact with Forerunner technology so easily, the saga introduced a concept known as Gesh, or as I'm sure most of you know the word, Gias. A Gesh, also known as a gene song, is information stored in a being's genetics that will activate under certain conditions. A Gesh can manifest as a set of instructions, ancient memories, or in the case of most humans, the ability to activate Forerunner technology. And since it's genetically stored, a Gesh can be passed down from generation to generation. As 343's tenure has continued, we've gotten more hints and details about the Human-Forerunner connection, such as the old waypoint page for Forerunners confirming that they were seeded on their home world, Gibalb, 15 million years ago, or Halo Warfleet confirming that Forerunners worked directly under the precursors for a time. In 2021, however, definitive answers would come from a new book, Halo Point of Light, by author Kelly Gay. A sequel to her two previous Halo books, Halo Smoke and Shadow and Halo Renegades, part of the book's plot revolves around the Librarian. The Forerunner who would become the Librarian was born different from her fellow Forerunners. She had hair instead of fur, her facial features were notably different, and she would cry a lot, something Forerunner babies almost never did. In short, she was a lot more human in appearance, and in some cases behavior, than Forerunner. When Forerunners reach maturity, they undergo a process known as mutation, which does pretty much what you'd expect. Knowledge is gained and a Forerunner's body is altered. For the Librarian though, mutation wouldn't bring relief, only more questions. Her facial features, her hair, it all stayed the same. And where Forerunners will sometimes grow a sixth finger during that mutation process, the Librarian did not. She still looked remarkably human. The Librarian set out to discover the reason for this, and she was eventually successful. Quote, "Finding complete works would prove difficult indeed, leading me to the same conclusion as others before. There had been a true, concerted effort to suppress these studies. What remained was a patchwork which, when laid out, suggested the precursors, our esteemed and mysterious creators, had given form and breath not only to us, but to humanity as well. Brothers, as one ancient sage proposed. Humans, according to what I found, shared a genetic structure homogeneous to our own. In other words, humans and Forerunners share a common ancestor." In short, humans and Forerunners are still very much related, but the relationship has changed quite a bit from where it started. Humans were selected as the successor to the Forerunner legacy largely by the Librarian herself, who made as many efforts as she could to ensure the human species would survive, thrive, and eventually be ready to take up the mantle of responsibility. To that end, humans were implanted with Gai or Gesha that would, among other things, allow them unfettered access to Forerunner systems. And quick side note, while humans can activate Forerunner tech with ease, this doesn't mean that other species simply can't work with Forerunner tech. It just takes them much, much longer. Back to it though, I want to wrap this up with a little theory of sorts, detailing how I see the human-Forerunner relationship at the moment. Billions of years ago, the enigmatic precursors seeded the Milky Way, possibly the universe, with the potential for life. Sometimes the precursors were hands-off with the life that would emerge. Other times they'd interact more directly. Around 15 million years ago, the precursors took a population of early hominids from Earth, planting them on the planet Gibalb and artificially evolving them. This population, the Forerunners, served the precursors directly for a time, but their masters eventually disappeared, leaving the Forerunners to watch over the galaxy. At this point, things should start sounding at least a little familiar. Forerunners rule over the galaxy for a few million years, but the precursors return and aren't happy with the mess their kids made of the galaxy. When the precursors decide that humans should be tested next, the Forerunners weren't too happy and struck at their creators. The precursors were largely wiped out, and much of what remained of them eventually became the Flood. And there you have it, the chronology of the human-Forerunner relationship and how it has changed over the years. Even today, this topic is debated among casual and hardcore fans alike, and while the debate isn't going to end anytime soon, fandoms am I right, I hope at least this video was enlightening to those who see it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and if there are any lingering questions, I'm happy to address those in the comments as well. For now, this has been Halo Canon. Thank you to my lovely patrons over on Patreon, and to all of you who watch. I'll see you all next time. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Horospis patrons. First, there's Hope, then we have Freight, Discombobulated Sycophant, Justin Montgomery, Man in the Dark, Keisha Dila, Daddy Anarchy, Great Scott Productions, Jumpy Sucks Balls, Ever Corrado, and Embezzled True 1010. Thank you all for your amazing support of the channel. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shout out, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind the scenes materials, including raw audio for upcoming videos, or even shoutouts like this. All patrons now get early access to certain videos as well, and your Patreon title will appear in the Halo Canon Discord. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. If you really enjoy my stuff, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.